She never lost safety at the end. She learned very early that safety did not exist for her. The first proof came when her mother died in childbirth, leaving her alone with a father who did not look at grief, only inheritance. Joanna Lannister was gone, and Tywin Lannister continued standing. The damage was quiet but complete. Love did not protect women. It removed them. Cersei learned that survival would not come from being cherished, only from being necessary. She was still a child when she went with Melara Heatherspoon to the woods outside Casterly Rock. They laughed at first, then found Maggie the frog. The woman took Cersei's hand and spoke of crowns, dead children, and a younger queen who would take everything she held dear. The event was small. A hut, a voice, a prophecy. The damage came immediately. The future stopped being open. Cersei learned that waiting was dangerous, because something unseen was already moving toward her. On the walk back, Melara kept asking what the words meant. Cersei pushed her into the well. The fall was sudden. The splash brief. The silence final. A friend was gone, and no one ever accused her. The damage was not fear of punishment. It was the opposite. Cersei learned that acts could disappear, that guilt was optional, that safety came from removing witnesses before they became threats. When her betrothal was arranged, she imagined Rhaegar Targaryen. She imagined gentleness, distance, reverence. Instead, she was given Robert Baratheon. The wedding night was quick and careless. He called her another woman's name. The damage was immediate. Desire did not see her. It used her. Cersei learned that marriage was not a shelter. It was exposure. Robert drank. He hunted. He left her alone with his children and his debts. He laughed with men and struck her when displeased. Each bruise was hidden, each insult swallowed. The damage accumulated in private. Cersei learned that endurance was mistaken for consent and silence for weakness. She turned to Jaime Lannister because he was familiar and because he did not leave. The act was deliberate. Incest was not indulgence. It was control. The damage came from repetition. Every time she chose him, she narrowed her world to one secret room. Cersei learned that safety could be simulated, but only if the lie was maintained perfectly. She bore children who were not Robert's. Joffrey came screaming and red. Myrcella quiet. Tommen soft. Each birth was an event of defiance. The damage was structural. Every child was proof that her life depended on deception. Cersei learned that love now increased danger instead of reducing it. When Robert returned from the hunt wounded, she watched him die without calling for help. The room smelled of wine and blood. His breathing slowed. The crown passed without ceremony. The damage followed instantly. Power arrived without trust. Cersei learned that killing a threat did not end danger. It multiplied it. Ned Stark confronted her in the Godswood. He spoke of honor. He offered mercy. He gave her time to flee. The event was quiet, almost kind. The damage was decisive. Mercy was a trap disguised as virtue. Cersei learned that people who believed in rules could be outmaneuvered, but never relied upon. She ordered his arrest. She watched Joffrey defy her and call for his head. The blade fell. The crowd roared. The damage was public. Authority slipped from her grasp even as she sat the throne. Cersei learned that power given could not be taken back, only endured. War came. Letters arrived. Robb Stark rose in the north. Renly crowned himself. Stannis gathered ships. Each claim pressed inward. The damage was spatial. The world shrank to King's Landing. Cersei learned that safety was not a place, only a moment before intrusion. She relied on Littlefinger and Varys, knowing neither served her. She fed one gold and the other secrets. Each alliance was provisional. The damage was mental. Trust became a liability she could not afford. Cersei learned that vigilance was exhausting but necessary, and rest was indistinguishable from surrender. When Joffrey was poisoned at his wedding, he clawed at his throat and died in her arms. The hall emptied. The music stopped. The damage was unbearable. Love proved itself fatal. Cersei learned that even absolute control could not prevent loss, only delay it. Tommen took the throne, small and frightened. The crown slid down his brow. The damage was immediate. She could not protect him by ruling. She could only rule by frightening him. Cersei learned that motherhood and safety were incompatible roles. She armed the faith militant to counter the Tyrells. The High Sparrow smiled and accepted. The damage came later, but without surprise. Power outsourced returned, sharpened. Cersei learned that tools become judges when given legitimacy. She was arrested, stripped, shorn, walked naked through the city she once commanded. The crowd spat, bells rang. The damage was total exposure. Fear became external, no longer imagined. Cersei learned that safety had never been real, only postponed. She returned to the Red Keep wrapped in cloth that felt thinner than skin. The doors closed behind her, but nothing sealed. Servants would not meet her eyes. Guards did not kneel. The damage was not humiliation alone, it was recognition. Cersei learned that safety requires belief, and belief had been stripped away. She slept poorly, waking to imagined footsteps and remembered laughter. Qyburn replaced the maesters she no longer trusted. He brought her a creature stitched from violence and obedience. Sir Gregor Clegane rose silent and massive. The damage was subtle. Protection no longer spoke. Cersei learned that safety without humanity feels like a cage that moves. She watched Tommen drift toward the faith, drawn by calm voices and simple answers. The boy listened. He smiled. He obeyed them. The damage tightened. Her authority over him weakened with every prayer. Cersei learned that gentleness attracts what force cannot, and she possessed none of it. Margaery Tyrell was released. The High Sparrow preached restraint. The city breathed again. The damage was isolation. Cersei stood alone in her own castle. She learned that being feared does not prevent replacement. It accelerates it. She chose wildfire because fire did not negotiate. Beneath the sept of Baelor, the jars waited, green and patient. The event was mechanical. Orders were given. Fuses were lit. The damage arrived in light. The sept exploded. Stone lifted. People vanished. The faith died. The Tyrells burned. Cersei watched from above as sound reached her late. She learned that absolute solutions erase threats, but also erase the world they were meant to secure. Tommen stood at a window when the tower shook. He heard the bells. He understood. He stepped forward and fell without a sound. The damage ended something that had been weakening for years. Cersei learned that safety purchased with annihilation leaves no one left to protect. She crowned herself queen in an empty hall. No cheers followed. No songs. The crown was heavy and final. The damage was clarity. There would be no approval. Only endurance. Cersei learned that ruling without witnesses feels like standing watch over a grave. Daenerys Targaryen crossed the narrow sea with dragons and armies. The city whispered her name. The damage was inevitability. A younger queen had come just as promised. Cersei learned that prophecy does not hurry. It waits until resistance exhausts itself. She fortified the Red Keep. She stored food. She trusted no one except the silent giant who never slept. The damage was constant tension. Every day required readiness. Cersei learned that vigilance consumes the same energy as fear, but never resolves it. Jaime returned, changed. He spoke of oaths and limits. He looked at her as if seeing something end. The damage was relational. The one refuge she built began to crumble. Cersei learned that love shaped by survival cannot survive growth. When the bells rang during Daenerys' assault, Cersei stood on the walls. The city below burned anyway. Fire fell from the sky. Streets filled with screaming. The damage was revelation. Surrender had never been part of the equation. Cersei learned that safety does not exist in the presence of dragons. She fled downward as the castle broke apart. Corridors collapsed. Stone dust filled her lungs. The Red Keep, built to endure, began to kill her. The damage was betrayal by structure. Cersei learned that fortresses fail from the inside. In the map room, the ceiling cracked. Jaime found her there. They held each other as the stones fell. No guards, no crowns. The damage was final narrowing. All strategies ended. Cersei learned that the only safe place she ever built was another person, and even that could not stand. The stones crushed them quietly. There was no last speech, no judgment, just weight and dark. The damage completed its work. Cersei learned, too late to matter, that safety was never something she could seize. It was something she destroyed every time she reached for it.